You are now listening to Out of the Blank.
Welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank podcast. I'm here with Peter Veunnasack. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, that's correct, Robbie. Thanks for having me.
Well, tell me a little bit about yourself, Peter, and what do you do professionally?
I'm in my mid-30s. I'm into pop culture, so I'm a bit of a nerd. Uh, on the professional side, I'm a mail carrier. So I'm your friendly neighborhood mailman. In terms of hobbies, podcasting wise, that's what I love to do. To a lot of people, podcasting is a hobby, but to me, it's a little bit more than that. Right, it's the interactions with the fans, it's your listeners, the people that give you their time. Those are the people I enjoy interacting with, and they ultimately become family sometimes.
I have something to ask you about the whole mail carrier job scenario, because I've talked to a few people that do the same position, and they're also fellow podcasters, and they tell me about their hours, and it seems like those are like the perfect hours. You're up, like if you're doing a newspaper route, you're up pretty early before everyone else is awake. But also, does it scare you that the fact that now we're having all of these auto drive cars now, where it seems like it's eliminating kind of the postal service in a way?
That's a very good question. I've been doing this for almost 13 years now. And as far as I can remember, there was always something that was going to affect the Postal Service. For almost 13 years, I've heard they're going to eliminate Saturday delivery. Well, guess what? We not only are we still delivering mail 6 days a week, we added Sundays where some carriers come in and deliver Amazon packages. So we're just always looking to stay competitive in terms of drones or automatic driving vehicles. Well, if you need somebody that still has to take the packages to the door. Some things still need signatures. People are often asking, like, well, do people even utilize the mail anymore? Well, absolutely. You have hospitals, that send out medicine, to make it more convenient for people. You have legal services that also still use hard copies of things and need those sent out. So we're still going to be relevant for the foreseeable future. It's just going to be a little bit more competitive with people. Like Amazon just started hiring their own drivers instead of using the post office or FedEx or UPS a little bit.
I think Amazon's trying to basically eliminate everyone from the game possible.
I think so too, but it seems as though I think their own drivers seem to have a little bit more issues. You got to remember the post office has been around for hundreds of years, and we also go from door to door, every door in America. Amazon drivers, even UPS drivers and FedEx drivers, they have to go from delivery to delivery. I often find some of those people on the wrong streets, wrong side of town.
Hey,
It's like
one of my car accidents, I was hit by a FedEx driver. So
yeah, so I'm not going to say the postal carriers are don't get into accidents themselves, because we clearly do, but
well, your people make mistakes.
We are absolutely, nobody is a machine, and we will make mistakes. And that's the other thing too. People are like, I feel they hold us to a bit of a higher standard because we're quote unquote, the government, which we're actually state, but.
Yeah, they don't understand too. Like you hear a lot of incidents, like some cases where usually around Christmas time or when presents and very valuable items are being shipped, you hear about like they'll drop it off at a package at the doorstep, and next thing you know, they leave, someone grabs their package. There was a big scare of that, I think, like a couple of years ago. People wanted to get security cameras and all this stuff because people are just taking Christmas packages. You guys are there for the service. Mostly you're there to deliver it on time and also make sure you get all your stuff delivered by a certain time for your route. A lot of people look at you as like, oh, like you were delivering this package to me and it wasn't here on time. It said it was going to be between these hours, then the hours changed. Well, there's traffic too. Keep that in mind. I think people become more sensitive and more kind of, I guess, angry towards you as a person that you're not doing your job correctly, because they get kind of sensitive, because usually they're waiting on that package for so long. So when it is expected that day, they want it to be like right there in the morning when they wake up.
Yeah, absolutely, and and that's another thing that's a bit of a disadvantage for us because we're a little bit behind in technology. So when we started implementing, quote unquote, real time tracking, that's where it was kind of hurting us at times because people are able to see where their packages are. Sometimes they end up at the wrong stations. Things happen.
I have to bring
Um,
this up. What happens if you have to take a shit and you have a package that's supposed to be delivered right now? And the guy's like, why is he at the gas station for 3 hours now? Why is he not moving? What's going on? Is the tracking messed up? No, it says he's still there. Well, what's he doing at the gas
yeah,
station? And you're like, I had to
yeah.
poop, man. I had the gas station sushi, and this is what happened. I'm sorry. I couldn't deliver you your ointment or whatever you needed.
Well, if you gotta take a shit, you go take a shit, and
Exactly.
hopefully it is in an actual restroom too, because I have seen mail carriers end up on the news for going where they shouldn't be going. That happens, and I'm not trying to apologize for those type of people, but we're under so much. Big Brother is always watching us. We have our scanners that tell whoever's looking exactly where we are and how long we've been idle and things of that nature. Um, Good thing for us is most of our packages, their expected due dates are the day of, and usually they say by like close of business, which is later on in the evening to kind of cover our asses. And then we have
You get
express
the
mail.
Yeah, you get the priorities done first.
Exactly. Those, there's different services. You can have your package expected by 10:30 a.m., noon, and then there's even one like 3 p.m. So those would be clearly marked, and those, you can deviate those packages to make sure you get those on time because those are guaranteed. Otherwise, you get to those other deliveries when you get to them because every single route, it has a line of travel. So there's a delivery sequence. So we don't just jump around and drive randomly to different blocks. Usually you go block by block, and there's boundaries and things like that. So everybody's assigned their own routes and their own actual deliveries.
I think it's pretty cool. If you look at the progression of the mail system, a lot of people think, like you were saying earlier, that the mail, there's no need for it anymore. How many people actually use mail? Well, we use mail every day. It's
Mm,
turned into a new form where we have email. We have these things. It's more of an online basis. But if you look at mailing, if ever you need to mail a document, you get a jury summons, anything that involves government, that comes through the mail. And you have to go buy stamps and you have to mail it back, because
right.
that is a priority. If you're trying to ship something across a long distance, you need to get the weight analyzed. You need to get all these things. I always wondered what would happen if I pooped in an envelope and mailed it to my landlord, but apparently that doesn't fly through the mail. But
No, no, it doesn't.
it's funny because we had this one kid at my local high school as a senior prank, picked up cow poop and tried to mail it through the mail to our principal. And
It's possible. I mean, I'm not going to tell you guys exactly how to do it, but people do mail samples to the hospitals. They have their own envelopes and things of that nature. So sometimes we even have to collect samples.
oh my goodness.
It sucks. Yeah.
Do you ever just
But
wonder, like, what's in this? Like, I mean, how many times as a person, we all have the curiosity factor, which is like probably the one bad part about me if I was a news or if I was a mail carrier, is I'd probably be shaking the packages, wondering what's in there. Like, oh, it's Christmas time. I wonder what this guy got. Oh, it sounds like a bell or a whistle or something. And then like next thing you know, it's like a hamster and you murdered the hamster.
oh yeah, no, we do. I don't believe there's any. I've only seen like live birds, kind of come through, but those are clearly packaged in a certain way that they're actual birds and they're
Wait,
labeled as such.
you've mailed or you've seen a bird, like you've carried it on your route before?
Oh yeah, live birds. We keep that separated from the other packages for
Do you
the
ever
obvious reasons.
Do
Oh,
you
people.
ever like have to walk that actually up to the, like, I know you're not leaving it in a mailbox. Like you don't know if that person's going to check their mail. If you leave a bird in the mailbox, that bird's dead. But when you deliver it to the door, you ever wonder like who the fuck ordered the toucan in the back? Like what is happening right now?
Usually when it's something like that, people are expecting it, and most of the times they're home. If we get to the house and there's nobody there to answer the door, typically we would just bring that back because you'd have to leave a notice for them to come pick it up. We wouldn't just leave anything on the doorstep because there are things that also need signatures. And if no one's there to sign for it, we leave a notice, so yeah, I've seen all types of things come through. I've seen people mail a flip-flop, just one flip-flop, as like a postcard.
Hey, man, I saw you lost this flip-flop.
Yeah,
I don't know where the other
exactly.
one is, but I found
Return to
this
sender, right? So, yeah, all types of things. As long as you're covering the postage, if it's for the right weightage and size, and you put enough postage and an address, most of the times we can actually send that stuff. You can't send liquids, you can't send alcohol. So there are stipulations, but for the most part, you could almost send anything.
So tell me exactly what's probably the weirdest thing you can think of that could be mailed, that is allowed to be mailed, like regulation wise, like one that would be the weirdest thing you could possibly find, but there's not really anything against it saying you could mail it.
It's hard for me to think of one just because I think somebody that works the window would know a lot more just because, they have questions that they have to ask. For me, I just deliver the package. So the most that I would even know what an item is if I happen to catch like where it's coming from, if it was directly ordered from a certain company and I know what that company is, or if I like you mentioned like the holidays or something like that. So most of the times we don't know what something is unless we happen to hear a toy go off, something that plays a lullaby. And a lot of times people they don't package something well enough that by the time it gets to the receiver, like the package is slightly damaged. You got to think about all the packages that get sorted and get stacked and all that extra weight. We do the best that we can, but again, since we are the representatives of the post office, we are the ones that kind of get the shit, one-on-one, because we are the ones that people see first for the most part.
Now, do you prefer to actually greet your customers or greet the people you're delivering the mail to, or do you just prefer to leave it by the door and not have to deal with anything?
It depends on my mood of the day, to be honest with you. Because I do consider myself a people person. I'm actually a certified trainer for the post office. So any new carriers that come in, I have to train them. I've been an instructor in the classroom setting. A matter of fact, off mic, I mentioned to you that I'm on vacation here for a week, just a staycation. But on Tuesday, tomorrow, when I go back to work, I'm actually going to be training a brand new guy, which is going to kind of suck for him. I mean, it's good and bad because he's coming in at one of the most busiest times of the year. But after he gets trained up and knows enough, it's just going to get easier from here on out because after the holidays, then things get lighter.
I see. So I'm trying to come at it from because I have so many questions when it comes to mail delivery. I know that's a weird thing. People are like, why are you asking so many questions? Like, no, well, it's interesting. Like, cause I know like my personal mail carrier down here, we get her stuff on the holidays and stuff, even though we never really have a whole lot of communication, mostly because whenever we get a package, we're never home.
Right.
But she's really, really nice. Like,
Yeah.
she likes to sit and talk. She likes to do that, but also knows she has to get her route done.
That's right.
It's one area, like one woman that covers our whole area. So like she's constantly like relied on every single day. And we live in a pretty, it's an older community. I'm probably like me and my family are probably the youngest ones here. It's mostly like an old golf course, that old,
nice.
yeah, retirement type. It's not as nice as you would think. There's just a bunch of golf courses everywhere, but it's crazy because like you get to see the camaraderie and the stuff like that. I'm like, I think that would be the coolest thing if I was going to be a mail carrier, was to have that communication with people, be able to crack a joke. And then like you were saying, have your days where you just kind of want to drop off the package and go on.
Yeah, yeah. I find it rewarding doing what I do, and that's why I became a trainer. I wasn't voluntold. I actually went to management and said, "Hey, I would like to be a trainer." Not only management have to believe that I would be a good candidate to do so. The union, we have a union as well that also have to agree. So once both sides agree, I go to a training myself to learn how to teach a class and instruct and all of these, and then I get certified and just attest to it. So there's a bit of a process, and the reason I wanted to become a trainer is, again, I feel like I am a people person, but I also spent, pardon me, I spent 10 years in the Army. And while I was in the Army, I was doing the old motto, be all you can be. So I try to bring that into the post office side. And I always try to learn what I can so that way I can help others when people have questions. Just because, there's so much that, uh, there's so many moving parts in what we do, and it's often things are often, I don't want to say overlooked, but we have so many things that are on our mind. Our job is so tedious. We have all these things that we have to remember in our daily routine, and sometimes we go on autopilot, and it's very easy to kind of just overlooks a small detail throughout our day. But having your own route, what I liked about it, the route that I had the longest was about 5.5 years, I would say. And what I loved about it was seeing families grow. I remember a newlywed couple moving into or onto the route, and then they had a baby, and then I got to see the baby grow up to about 3-4 years old before I left that route. You mentioned you give your mail lady tips or whatever during the holidays. We often get that too. I had a business that gave me a couple $100 just because I come in every single day with a smile. They treat me like family. They feed me. If they have like a little office party, they have some food. They always pack a little food on a little plate, wrap it up for me. And because I have to put it in a bag and walk it all the way back up to my vehicle. I have mail in my hand and packages in my satchel. So people take care of me when you take care of them.
Now, do you walk these or do you drive?
I do a little bit of both. I'm actually, so I don't have my own route anymore. What I am is called a utility carrier, and what that is, I sub for the same 5 people every week. So all those 5 people have a different day off because we all work 5 days a week, but there's 6 days of delivery. So I'm the guy who subs for these same 5 people on their days off. So I kind of have customers. A lot of the people that I do deliver to on these routes, some of them recognize me, the ones that I see often. But since I'm like the sub, it's the regular carriers that tip me.
I see. So how did you go from
Or yeah.
how did you go from delivering public kind of mail in a way for the old kind of mail where you were kind of delivering a whole nother form in the Army?
Well, I wasn't I mean, in the Army, I was.
That's a bad pun on words. I was trying to say like it was like a propaganda act for the Army or whatever. They're all like, be all you can be, or Army strong, that whole propaganda.
Right.
I was like, so tell me, how did that transition happen? Like you went kind of a completely different route. You
Okay, yeah,
traded
okay,
in
I
the
see what you're saying.
combat boots for a satchel and shorts.
Right. Funny you bring up the shorts because I'm the weird guy who stays covered up all year long. So 100-degree weather, I'm wearing pants and a windbreaker, and I'll get to that. But the transition to answer your question is, yeah, I served almost 10 years, and a lot of people were like, "Dude, you were halfway there. You could retire at 20." Well, I had a family at a very young age. Okay, I had my oldest son right now. You mentioned you're 21. My oldest son is 19. I had him the end of junior year in high school, so I was one of the original teen parents. So I enlisted into the military, and my then girlfriend, who's now my wife, we've been together almost 17 years, or no, almost 18 years. Ooh, hopefully she doesn't listen to this. Almost 18 years, and I helped out with the Hurricane Katrina effort. I went to Afghanistan. I served active duty in Kansas. So I had to leave the family for long periods of time, at least 3 times. My son was 10 years old when he started telling me he didn't want me going away anymore. My then girlfriend, who was watching my son, who's not hers, she said that it was, being very difficult with me being gone, because she felt like a single parent. She loved my son as her own, but she was kind of doing it on her own as well. So that really struck a chord, and I made the difficult decision of in not re-upping, as they say, right? So I at the end of my term, I did not re-enlist, and then after that, I sought out a regular job. Her parents actually both work for the Postal Service. Her mom works at the plant processing mail. Her father does what I do. And so they said, hey, well, you're a veteran. Why don't you go try at the post office? And I applied. And funny enough, I actually got hired on as a civilian. So I didn't get my military point or anything like that because I just wasn't thinking about it. And I took my test with the general public and I didn't have the right forms to get the extra points. But I ultimately got the job anyway.
Yeah, you wanted to trade in because you had a family starting out. You wanted to be a little bit more at home, like you were saying. That's a good way. It seems like what a lot of people who are in the military decide to do, especially when they have a family. They end up realizing this time away from them is not very good for them and not very good for the family back at home.
Absolutely.
Which
a lot of missed holidays,
Yeah, a lot of missed holidays. And it's crazy because do you work holidays doing mail?
I do. It gets really. Matter of fact, I mean, it's funny that it's November now. October, I felt for some reason it just felt a little bit more overwhelming than most Octobers. But we're definitely in the season now where our hours are a lot longer. The latest I've clocked out, Robbie. The latest I have clocked out was 10 p.m.
Ooh, damn. How are you delivering packages at 10 o'clock at night? You show up
Well,
to my door with a package. It better be expected. It better not be like, oh, here's your water bill. If you showed up at my porch at 10 o'clock with that, I'll be like, all right, buddy. Look,
yeah.
I'm eating family dinner right now.
There's all types of things. And, and people are like, they see us at 6, 7, 8 o'clock PM at night. And some people have been like, wow, you're still working out this late. And, on our side, it's like, yes, like we had a choice. I did not wake up at 2 p.m. and just decide to go to work. So what people don't understand is the volume of mail dictates how long you'll deliver. We all have, this computer program that says, hey, you have about this amount of mail volume and this amount of packages. This is about how long it should take you today. So the more mail, mathematically, it's going to take you longer. And there are other things that happen too. So not only are you taking care of your own route, recently here in Oregon, we had voters' ballots and pamphlets all mailed out. So in Oregon, we can vote through the mail. They send you your ballots, you check off a bunch of things, slap a stamp on it, and you mail it in with the signature, and it gets counted. Those ballots, when they came, let's say a route averages about 1,500 letters. Okay, that could be utility bills, quote unquote junk mail, as people like to term it. And then when the ballots came, you're looking at what, average 3 ballots per household. Let's say there's about 600 households on that particular route. You're looking at another 1,800 letters on top of the 1,500 that you already average. That's well over 3,000 letters that you're already having to manage, right? So that's going to take a little bit more time. People don't understand, like, well, it's the same amount of deliveries. Well, you're holding about 40 letters in your hands for about 20 houses. And by the time you get to one house, you're standing stationary, thumbing through all that mail, looking for just that one house before you have to move, right? So we're constantly moving, we're constantly sorting mail. And all the while, we have packages and little parcels in our satchel that we have to be mindful of too. Because sometimes people will walk by a house and be like, well, damn, that's 3 houses back. So now I have to backtrack, or maybe if you wait until you're across the street from the house, you can walk across the street. So there's all these little things that you got to remember. And not only that, sometimes you got sick calls or you got people that have to get off early because of doctor's appointments. Well, you don't just stop delivery. Guess what? Somebody else has to pull that extra work, right? So I can spend 9 hours on my own route because of my mail volume, but then somebody calls in sick, I might have to pick up an extra hour, maybe 2 hours of the route. And sometimes that's at the beginning of the route. So now I'm going to the beginning of a route at 4 or 5 in the afternoon when they typically get there. So like maybe 9 in the morning, and so often people are like, they look at their wrist. Oh, you're late today. Again, like we don't know.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
Right. So, I hate to, bring up like the joke of, oh, a disgruntled postal worker. Well, we're under so much stress and, you got management on your back and the public on your back. Again, we're held to a certain
higher
standard because, yeah.
I can see that. It's crazy because I think when it comes to a lot of what has really been sparking my interest lately is the amount of advertisements that get monetized through the mail now. Like you're used to seeing advertisements on your phone. It seems like your every waking minute has become just one giant advertisement. But how often when you actually deliver mail, you put it in the mailbox, whatever, is it just magazines and advertisement for so much stuff?
Yeah. A lot of it is that, but there's still a lot of people, including our own household. We still prefer like paper billing, and I know you want to go green and save paper, but they have a routine of how they know what bills have been paid and stuff, and then everyone has their own way that works for them. Um, excuse me, but often I do find that a lot of times where people are like, oh, is there anything good? And we have a certain reputation, so I always crack jokes. If I don't see anything quote unquote good that they might like, I go, oh, no lottery checks today. I'm sorry. And then they get a good chuckle and they take the mail and they go inside. But yeah, and we can't filter out that mail for people. We have to deliver what comes. We are paid to deliver those specific mails from those companies. A lot of time people, write return to sender. And sometimes, that sender didn't even pay for that piece of mail to come back. So it never gets back to them anyway. Um, you know, uh, yeah, I mentioned how sometimes people call in sick and things like that. Well, sometimes routes don't even have an assigned carrier. It could be something where maybe the neighborhood isn't so great, or maybe the route is just way too overburdened, where you just have way too many deliveries, and it's difficult to deliver on an average of 8 hours of work. So sometimes routes like those, somebody will come on, not like it, and then end up leaving. And then you have to wait for the next bidding cycle for somebody to even be interested in that route. And so because of that, you often get maybe sometimes somebody new every single day. Sometimes that route is split up every single day and there's 5 or 6 people trying to complete it. Um, when things like that happen, obviously you're going to have a number of people who don't know the route, who don't know the names. And again, that's where we are the representatives of the Postal Service. So when you get a piece of mail that you keep getting for somebody that you don't know, you go to this mail carrier like, this person doesn't live here. Or you might get a nasty note from the customer written on the mail. We don't know. We're just delivering as addressed. You know what I mean? So yeah, we go through so many things. It's hard holding that smile throughout the day. And that's why sometimes, depending on the day, I just want to deliver your mail in your box and just walk away. I don't need anybody to stop me, especially if you just reminded me that I'm about 4 hours behind. I don't need to stop and talk to you. And
Yeah.
sometimes that's the other thing too. Sometimes we're like the barbers, right? People want to talk to us because sometimes we are the highlights of people's days. And that's okay. But you got to remember that we are on, quote unquote, on a schedule. So, sometimes people aren't mindful of how long they've been talking to us. Sometimes they just want to share what's been going on. And sometimes people just need to be heard. And I totally understand that. And over the years, going on 13, I have developed certain things I can to say to kind of speed things up. Now when somebody says, hey, or, usually I see people first, they're working in their yards. I'll say, hey, how you doing? And if I'm behind or if I don't want to have a long conversation and they say, good, how are you? I go, good, thanks. And that's it, right? That doesn't open up for you to reply because sometimes I can just stop right there. But sometimes they might continue on. So there's little tricks to kind of get people to stop talking.
Yeah, I like that there's this weird kind of camaraderie when some dude comes up and goes, "Can you sign this?" and be like, this package isn't for me. Like, I just need someone to sign." You can write anything down, and it seems like they just accept it anyway, as long as someone was there and put the pen to the thing.
Well, there are certain items that it does need to be signed by the recipient. For example, Department of Child Services, right? Sometimes those mail come restricted delivery, which actually needs that person's signature. And it's all about the wording. You say, hey, I have this mail for this person. Are they here to sign for it? I think most people are pretty honest, and nobody's going to be like, oh, yeah, that's me. Let me sign that very important piece of mail from Department of Child Services. You know what I mean? So But we are trained to also ask for ID for different types of deliveries that do require that.
An over
Adult
120
signatures.
age, like an over 21 age type thing. You
Yeah.
could answer the door, be like, yeah, I got this package for your mom. Is your mom home? No, but I can't. She said I can sign for it. I don't think you want to sign for this. Why? And you look at the box, it just says dirtied up sex shop stuff on there.
Right.
Like, I don't want to hand this to you because you're a child and I know what's in this box because it's been vibrating for the past 45 minutes.
Yeah. Those are usually over 18, I believe. But again, just ask for some ID. And if you're uncomfortable, we can always leave a note and say, oh, she's not here. Okay, here, let me leave this slip here with the information on it. And she can come pick it up or ask us to redeliver on a day that she is here.
Dude,
So,
I just tell them if they're going to leave it. Like I like the aspect now when you deliver or when you order something, you can tell like delivery instructions, just leave it by the side of the door or leave it something like inside the door.
mm-hmm.
Some dude left a video game. I don't know if you know the game Halo Reach.
I'm familiar with the Halo franchise.
Okay, my grandma bought this game and had it pre-ordered and sent to my house. She's from Baltimore, so we're about a couple states away.
Okay.
And so I was like, oh my God, it says I'm going to get this game. So all my friends are playing it and I'm waiting on the fucking mail guy. I know. But I was a kid. I've learned. But I'm sitting there like, I'm going to meet him at the mailbox. I've been up since 5 a.m. He's not here. I'm going to meet him at the mailbox. I waited at the mailbox till I think I went at like 10. I waited till lunch, dude. Okay. I was around there 12:30. Mail guy comes, delivers everything. Nothing. I said, hang on, you forgot my package. He said, there's no package in here for that name. There's no package at all in there for this at all. I'm like, okay, is there any possible way that you left it somewhere or you gave it to somebody else? So I ended up questioning him for 30 minutes. I ended up riding home really, really upset. So I rode home on my bike, parked my bike, like, God, this sucks. I open up the door and I crunch right on the game.
Oh, no.
Dude, I was so angry, but when you pre-ordered it came in a hard covered box. So the crunching was the actual stuff that was packaged around the box. So I didn't actually hurt the game. But you got to saw my eyes and the fire in them and watch the light just like someone just snuffed my flame when I heard that crunch. My dad's like, oh, like he just looked at me. He was like, did you just break your game? I'm like, I don't know. I'm afraid to look, man. And I ended up, having a good time playing all that. But they delivered it to my doorstep, but they placed it in the most inconvenient spot where I was a kid, had other things in my mind, rushing up the steps, trying to figure out where this package is. I run up and go and open up the door, and it's right, like literally under the placemat. Like who places that right there?
Honestly, a lot of people, because it disguises it from the sidewalk. Because if you just left it on the porch and anybody that walks by can see it and they'll steal it. Being somebody in the delivery service, and not just the post office, we try our best to hide the packages so nobody can see it, because there's nothing worse than knowing that you delivered a certain package and then finding out later that there was a call saying, hey, my package isn't here, or it was stolen. Or one time, I remember specifically delivering a package, and then a few hours later, I saw that very package opened on a side street later on in my route. So, how do I explain that, right? So we do the best that we can, and there's really no rhyme or reason to where you put a package. Is actually on the person that delivers it. But for the most part, the rule of thumb is if you can see it from the sidewalk, you're not hiding it well enough.
All right, so we've asked and we talked about mail for a lot now. I'm sorry.
No worries.
I've drained you on the mail. I want to get over to this because we're talking about delivering a whole new message. A message of, do you want to finish it for me?
I don't know where you're going with it.
You know where I'm going with this. Your podcast, the Cobra Kai podcast. You're doing a podcast on the fucking Karate Kid. Okay.
I am. I do. Yeah.
So where were you when you first saw this movie?
I cannot remember when I first saw it. It came out in 1984. I was born in 1983. So my guess would be late 90s, late 80s, I would imagine. I'm a huge Back to the Future fan, and I probably saw these two movies about the same time. I am Asian American. I'll throw that out now. And, the Karate Kid has Mr. Miyagi. I didn't have a grandfather around very much. I had grandfathers, but I was born in Texas, and one grandfather was there, and then the other grandfather was in Colorado. So I never got to see them growing up. I had one grandmother growing up with me here in Oregon. So I don't know. I wonder if like the Mr. Miyagi character I felt was like a grandfather because I never had one around. And so like I always kind of gravitated to that movie, but the relationship between Mr. Miyagi and Daniel was always something that stuck with me, very much like the characters of Doc and Marty from Back to the Future.
I like that because my first time, like I can explain to you exactly where it was. I was at my grandparents' house spending the summer up there. We'd work up on the summertime. It was probably around 12 or 13. Mostly just watching like average television, playing my PlayStation or something on, not when I'm not doing like lawn mowing or something like that. Just spending summers inside as a kid, especially when you're in Delaware, you're not near any of your friends. I was a whole state away. So I was like, all right, well, I have to be up here on the weekends, so might as well, see what my grandpa's up to. So I have this grandfather who's addicted to candy. I mean, Halloween candy, he hides it all over the fucking house. And so he's sitting in his chair watching Jason Segal, or not Jason, is it? It's Steven Seagal movies. That's his name. I keep getting that guy
Steven
wrong.
Seagal, yeah.
Well, he's watching the old Westerns and Steven Seagal movies. And next thing you know, Karate Kid pops on. And he's like, hey, Robbie, why don't you come in here and watch this with me? I'm like, oh, God, come on, man. I just want to go back and play my games. He's like, just come out here and watch this with me. Take an hour and let's watch Karate Kid. I'm like, what the hell is the Karate Kid? So I sit down and I'm watching it and I'm like, the whole time I'm thinking, I'm like, man, this is like my scenario, like getting picked on, being afraid to fight and all these types of things. And next thing I know, he finds this old Chinese master that starts teaching him all this stuff. And in the beginning, I'm like, he's making him do all his chores and shit.
Yeah.
He's making him paint the fence, wash the car, and the dude thinks he's going to teach him karate. Oh, once he gets that done, he'll teach him karate. Once he gets that done, he'll teach him karate. Oh, I swear, once he gets this done, he'll teach him karate. Next thing you know, he's like, you've already learned karate. I was like, at what moment did I get up, go to the bathroom, or get a drink that I missed the part where he taught him karate? And my grandpa's like, just watch. And I'm like watching a movie, and next thing you know, he's like, wax on. And I was like, holy shit. The next day, I got my ass kicked, but I swear to God, I thought I knew karate.
I think that did. I think a lot of us did that, right? At least a lot of stories I've heard. People, watch the the Karate Kid, and then they tried doing some of those training techniques at home, and then they try to go out and defend themselves, and it doesn't work. As realistic as that movie seemed, it's still a movie. So, did you try the crane kick? Is that what it was?
No, I tried just the wax on, wax off. I tried the crane kick off my bed, like trying to do like the jump and the kick kind of off the bed. Ended up breaking something where I was like, okay, not doing this again. But I just remember my grandfather was like, I bet you now you think you could take on the world. And I'm walking around like, I know karate from Mr. Miyagi.
Yeah, you know what I mean. The tournament scene, right? That's a little uplifting, and you got the music and the stuff. It's very triumphant at the very end. It makes people feel good. So I can see where he's going with that. Making you think that you could take on the world from watching this. It's a true underdog story, right? Just like when people watch Rocky, when they were younger. But
do you like that one better than the new one? Because I didn't like the Jaden Smith version that well. I'm a big fan of Jackie Chan, but I'm not a big fan of the way they did that movie. They made it a little bit too off the basis a little bit. And I didn't really like Jaden Smith's acting in a way.
Yeah, I think you kind of just touched on it. Like, I don't know if I've seen enough Jaden Smith's body of work to really have an opinion. I cannot base it on...
Can't base it on his dad's stuff. Okay.
Well, no, not that, but the Chinese version of the Karate Kid, and then I saw him in After Earth with his father. Not two good movies to really form an opinion on, to be honest. And maybe those are the only two that he's done. I don't follow his work. The biggest issue, the Chinese version of the Karate Kid was okay. Okay, Jackie Chan was great in it. I thought it was a good enough story. It's very much a remake. I think they tried to pay tribute to the original. The biggest issue I had with the remake is that Jaden Smith's character is like 12 years old, maybe 14. where you had Daniel, who was 16 in the movie. The other teenagers, they're much older. I feel that they were a little bit more relatable in the things that they did. The Jaden Smith's character, Dre Parker, he goes to China, meets this other girl who's his age, 12, 14 years old, and then they have a relationship. How are we supposed to relate to those two leads, who are like 12 to 14 years old?
Plus, it's a giant gap. You're looking at Jaden Smith, his acting, no offense to anybody that's a Jaden Smith fan out there, but in the movie, I couldn't really get the feeling or kind of the captured feel, I would say, of when I was watching, Daniel-san in the original Karate Kid. When I was watching that, it was a whole, like, Ralph Macchio. Like, when I was watching him play, it seemed like a little bit more believable. There was a little bit more. It's like when you watch Spider-Man and you see, like, Tom Holland play Spider-Man. He does an okay job. I'm not a fan, but Tobey Maguire was Spider-Man back in the day because he was literally like 30 years old playing an 18-year-old, and it made you believe he was 18 years old. Yeah. Like the first Spider-Man ever. And I don't know, it's just because I also like older classic movies, but I watched the new Karate Kid in theaters, and I'm sitting there, and at the ending, he goes and does like a backflip or whatever and kicks him in the head. I'm like, the fuck did I just watch? I'm like, I saw that, and my friends were all freaking out, like, oh! I was like, no. What was that?
Yeah, he kind of does a kick like Guile from Street Fighter or something, right? It's a little weird.
Fucking video game shit.
Yeah.
I was like, he's got wires on him or something. There's no freaking way. Where's the realistic version? The best part about the Karate Kid at the ending, it was simple. I don't like that Daniel-san won. I believe the real Karate Kid, I think we all know who that is.
William Zabka.
Yes.
Johnny Lawrence. Okay.
That is the real Karate Kid. He trained
that's
his
a lot of people's opinions too.
He was a jerk, but he was the one that trained. He was the one that was invested into that. He just took it a little too far. And at the ending, having respect for the man was a different play than in the new one. The new one was they made the kid a bully the whole entire time. They didn't give him that innocence factor. William Zabka learned. And now you look at William Zabka. I don't know if you saw the How I Met Your Mother when he was on there.
Not yet, no.
They made fun of him the whole time because Neil Patrick Harris is like, I want the real Karate Kid at my wedding. So they get Ralph Macchio, and he's like, no, it's William Zabka. And everywhere he's going, Zabka's going, everyone's throwing popcorn at him and saying boo because they just remember him from that one movie. And I was like, that's funny because with Will Smith and The Fresh Prince, they asked him before the show came out, they said, what do you want your character to be called? And just remember, whatever you choose, people are going to know you as the rest of your life. So he said, call me Will Smith on the show. Because that's his name. He wants to be known as himself. You don't remember Alfonso. You remember Carlton.
Right.
So that was the whole William Zabka thing. And he talks about the stress and anxiety he got from, people just remembering from being the bad guy in Karate Kid. And he's had other famous roles as well.
He has, and he was kind of typecasted in the 80s too. He played a lot of jerks back then. Yeah,
it's something about being white and blonde for some reason was a stereotypical jerk for some reason.
Kind of was, but on the flip side, you make a young woman blonde, blue eyes, and sometimes she's a bimbo, right? Depending on the movie. So
the whole point of Pam Anderson in Baywatch, man.
Yeah, see, so stereotypes. That's kind of how it was, and I feel as time has passed and people got more progressive in their writing, things like that change. We want to avert stereotypes.
So, what types of things did you really enjoy about like the Karate Kid? Now, we talked about kind of like where it felt like a relationship kind of thing with your having a grandfather, not a connection really. But is there certain scenes and stuff that you like ever tried, or maybe like I'm pretty positive that you probably practiced karate at some point. I mean, I did. I went in the backyard, lined up a bunch of like wood planks and stuff and tried to punch through boards and realized that these were not breakaway boards I could be hitting through.
It's actually interesting because I never took martial arts of any type, but I was a fan of the first two Karate Kid movies for the longest times. I'm a bigger fan of part 2, which I have found over the span of me covering Cobra Kai that some people actually really hate that movie, or they just don't like it, or they have their opinions of it. Having covered the show and interviewing the people that I have, I've been very fortunate, and I have had the pleasure of speaking with people who I never thought I'd ever speak with. I mentioned, I'm a big fan of Part 2. I once had lunch with Yuji Okamoto, who is the villain in Part 2. His character's name is Chosen. I sat down and spoke with him. I interviewed him first, previously over the phone and stuff, but then I drove up to Seattle because he has a couple of restaurants up there, and I thought he was just going to come say hello since I interviewed him, but he ended up sitting with me for like 3 hours, and we just had a conversation. And I asked him, I go, I have found that people don't like Part 2. They really love 1 and 3, but 3 is actually not a good movie, at least, in terms of the writing and things like that. It's very much a rehash of Part 1, kind of. And, he says, I think people really love the Cobras. They love Cobra Kai, and that is very absent in Part 2. It takes place in Okinawa, near Japan, and maybe that's what it is. It's more of Mr. Miyagi's story, and maybe people didn't really care for that story. They wanted Daniel getting beat up by the Cobras, and so that's where 1 and 3 comes in, and maybe that's why people gravitate to those movies a little bit more than Part 2.
Everyone wants to see the climb of the underdog. Nobody ever wants to see how that person got trained or the unraveling story behind it. They just want to see the underdog's climb to success.
Yeah. So I mean, that's why I love Part 2 just as much as I love Back to the Future Part 3, where that's mostly about Doc. And people are like, well, I don't like westerns. It's like it's a franchise about time traveling. What do you want him to be stuck in 1955 for all 3 movies?
Hey, all Back to the Futures were badass.
Yeah. I mean, I consider it one big saga, to be honest with you. So when people, say Part 2, Part 3, I kind of joke and say, you mean Act 2, Act 3? I mean, that's just a 6-hour movie, really.
Yeah, it's really, really good. I mean, dude, I learned Johnny Be Good because of that guy. When he went to go play at the talent show, I wrote that whole song down, every single thing where I know all the lyrics to it. And
that's awesome.
Because I had good times. Like I was at my grandparents, and if I went up to my grandparents in Baltimore, rarely get to see them. Next thing I know, I'm downstairs, in the basement or something, watching TV on their flat screen, and on a pull-out couch, and I'm just sitting there watching. Next thing you know, Back to the Future comes on. Back in the HBO days when you had to pay $6.99 for a film. I'd charge their bill and be like, it was good seeing you guys. Next thing you know, I get a call when I'm like 3 hours away. They're like, did you buy a bunch of Back to the Future movies? I was like, yep.
Yep, that's me.
That was me. I was listening
this guy with
to Marty
2 thumbs.
McFly.
I'm looking right behind me here. Actually, I have a shelf full of like Back to the Future toys and all different types of, the movies. I have the movies on VHS, which is actually in a pack. I have like DVDs and Blu-rays, different versions of them. I have all types of Funko Pops and Lego sets and all of this stuff. So that's probably the most collectibles I have is the Back to the Future stuff. Karate Kid and Cobra Kai, I'm slowly collecting some of those, but I'm not, those aren't going to be like my number one collectibles. I'm already doing the show, and the interviews alone are priceless to me. So apples and oranges, but that's what I'm doing with the whole Cobra Kai stuff.
Which do you care more about? Do you have more of a passion for Back to the Future just because it kind of hits you before the Karate Kid, or do you have more of a passion for Karate Kid based on all the people you've interviewed? I mean, you've met William Zabka, you've done so much with your podcast, and it's helped you get to meet all these amazing people from, especially something that you focus on too, but you get to see it turn into a TV show. Like, do you find that like they're doing it justice in the TV show? Do you find that you might end up want to do a podcast maybe on Back to the Future? It seems like you're a little bit more interested in that.
Well, the funny thing is, I host another podcast that's a retro movie review, and the idea for that show is to kind of review mostly movies that we grew up watching, see if they still hold up. So it's kind of, it's kind of like the concept of time traveling, right?
Oh no, I didn't leave out Podstalgic. I'll give you a shout out, Podstalgic.
Okay. All right. So I won't go too much into that, but that's kind of where like I still have like the tie to Back to the Future, because my episodes do open up with a Marty McFly introducing the podcast. The Cobra Kai stuff, I'm starting to become like really. I already was I was already in love with the Karate Kid movies, and then when this Cobra Kai show came along, it continued that story, but from a different perspective, with that of the Johnny Lawrence character. I love every episode. I'm loving everything that's coming out of that. Yeah, everyone's kind of refining it's kind of like hooking up with the ex, kind of, so to speak, I suppose. Yeah, I guess, because of the interviews and the reach that I'm getting with this particular podcast, I literally have listeners from around the world. In my Facebook group, I have an Italian woman who speaks no English at all, but she will go on the translator, type something in Italian, translate it to English, and communicate with us in the group. I will then take, my replies, put it in the translator into Italian, and then correspond with her that way. And we have a gentleman from Montreal where English is his second language. He speaks French, but speaks enough English to communicate. A woman from Uruguay, who listens to our show to work on her English. So I've never had these interactions before in any of the other podcasts I have done. I've hosted like over 5 or 6 podcasts, over going on 6 years here. But I think the reach and the interactions, in terms of podcasting, I think Cobra Kai is definitely like, my favorite thing to do. Is definitely become my number one podcast to put most of my focus into. And I look most forward to producing content for the Karate Kid and Cobra Kai. I have made friends with people who I have watched on screen like over decades, that they'll just randomly text me and ask me something, or, I have like a proposition, whether it's business or just for collaborations, so that's awesome. I can pull out my phone and I have like all these numbers to, again, people I've seen on screen, and some of which actually consider me a friend. I feel like I've become pretty close with like the creators as well, who came on my show for an interview. And I flew out to Atlanta just a few months ago, and one of them, gave me a tour of the sets. And from speaking with some of the moms whose sons are on the show, some of them have even said that there's sets that they haven't even seen that I got to see. So I think, I'm doing something right here, where the creators are enjoying my content as well. They enjoy the interviews that I'm doing with some of the younger cast members who are a little less publicized than the older cast members. So they're learning about these other people that work for them that maybe aren't on set as often as the others, and they don't get a chance to talk to them as much.
Now, what's your fascination with kind of flashback movies in a way? Because with your podcast, it's interesting, because I think we think around kind of older movies seem like they had a lot more of a basis to it than the stuff that gets played out now. It doesn't mean that the ones that get played out now are bad. It just means like it seemed like the older ones, like I could tell you like the original Ghostbusters, and then stuff like if you wanted to look at, Jim Carrey's older movies, the Cable Guy for one. I remember seeing that on TV. It's the older ones seem to have a little bit more of a story basis to it, a little bit more of including, like, you actually have to be paying attention, and then you start unraveling a bunch of stuff. And the newer ones, it seems like it's an explosion every 5 minutes. I mean, Angels in the Outfield, I'm pretty sure everybody remembers that. Field of Dreams, whatever. The list goes on and on and on. I can name a bunch of older movies that I've enjoyed more than the newer stuff, only on the concept of the newer stuff seems like, I understand it's trying so hard to keep your attention because it's so easily lost with how technology is today. But it seems like it loses a major point of it too.
It's funny you bring that up. First off, a little shameless plug, but I have reviewed both Angels in the Outfield and Field of Dreams. Again, right, these are movies that we grew up watching, and I mean everybody. When I first started the show, it was a father and son podcast. My son, again, now 19, we started when he was 14, and I think he maybe probably did like maybe the first 50 or 60 episodes. I kind of forget now. And he would just, I would introduce him to these movies I grew up watching, and he'd give his perspective. But as he got older, he became more involved in school and after school activities. And so I had to kind of evolve into bringing on other hosts to come on and review a movie. And then I finally got a steady co-host to be on every episode. But, nostalgia is a thing, right? I mean, that's why I think a lot of people love Cobra Kai, because it kind of brings them back to the Karate Kid movies that they watched growing up. with Podstalgic, we try to review movies on their big anniversaries, and that's kind of how we go about choosing the movies. Sometimes we'll just randomly pick one because we want to do an older movie, but a lot of times when you're out with your friends anyway, something comes up that reminds you about the past, and so that's kind of what we do about with these movies. Sometimes Field of Dreams, for example, I had not seen that movie growing up. It's a classic, and people love that movie. And people are like, "Well, how come you never seen Field of Dreams?" I was like, well, it's a baseball movie. I never got into baseball, and maybe that's why I never watched it.
I
Sometimes
started looking at cornfields differently whenever I saw that movie. I was like, damn, somebody's going to come out of them cornfields. It's going to be, what's his name? The famous Tracy Morgan coming out of the cornfield.
yeah, that'd be an interesting visit by Tracy Morgan. But that's kind of what we do. So we bring up the movie, and then not only do we talk about some of the other movies that came out that very weekend that movie came out, talk about the number one song, what our memories are of it, and then we talk about our history with the movie if we have any. And then before that, we dive into the movie and kind of have a free flowing conversation about the movie, get into certain details, like, man, I didn't remember this part, or wow, this happened and it does not hold up. So you mentioned, like some of the older movies in terms of the story are a little bit better. Well, again, the concept of the show is kind of revisiting these movies and seeing if they still hold up. A few months ago, we did Earth Girls Are Easy, right? You got Jeff Goldblum, Gina Davis, Jim Carrey, Damon Wayans. You're like, oh, that sounds like a hoot, and some maybe fondly remember it being good. We watched it and we're like, man, this movie is terrible. Like, who likes this movie? And it's one of our like biggest downloaded episodes. Earth Girls Are Easy. Who would have thunk? I haven't checked yet, but we also did Shawshank Redemption, which we both had fond memories of. Completely holds up. It's a lot of people's, one of their top favorite movies, and that was very popular too. So,
what's one movie that you've watched that hasn't held up that really, really hit you? Like you feel like you had to give it another try to watch it again, and it seemed like you lost even a little bit more respect for it.
I can't remember the last one that I had to that it took me multiple viewings to finish, but there has been some. Earth Girls Are Easy is probably the most recent one I remember that I just, we talked about it and we were both mad that we had to review it. Recently, we were going to review a movie called The Best Man for its 20th anniversary. That's a 2-hour quote unquote rom-com with Taye Diggs, Morris Chestnut, Nia Long. We both watched that, and then we texted each other like, this movie sucks. Like, let's just skip this one. And we were both okay with that. So we wasted our time watching that movie, and we disliked it so much that we decided to skip that movie and didn't even put an episode out. We were like, okay, we'll just wait for the next anniversary or whatever.
You know what I watched, remember, as a little kid, and then I watched it later and I didn't think it held up at all. I could tell you right now, Mighty Ducks, man.
Really?
Dude, I watched that movie when I was a kid. I was like, this is the best movie ever. And then I was like 14 and 15, and I saw that movie, the other hockey one that's on Netflix. I think it's like Slapshot or something.
Oh, yeah, Slapshot. Yeah, there's like 1 and 2. Okay, yeah.
Once I saw that, I was like, this is awesome, because it seemed like it took place around the same time, like the same kind of camera, and it seems like the same production style as like Mighty Ducks. And I went back and watched Mighty Ducks. I was like, damn, I don't like this movie at all anymore. And the same thing with Hocus Pocus. Like I remember watching that with my mom as a kid. Then I watch it now. I'm like, why was I so into this? This is the weirdest show ever.
Again, both movies I've reviewed. It's funny you mentioned Mighty Ducks because I thought it held up, but again, the Podstalgic, right? It's a play on nostalgia.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And so I don't know. Maybe I did review the trilogy 1, 2, and 3, and perhaps that was my nostalgia lens is on, right? Maybe I enjoyed those movies because I remember them fondly, but I guess to me it held up. Hocus Pocus, I can see what you mean by that. It's very much a family movie. It's a little dark in the very beginning because the Sanderson sisters, they do get hung in the very beginning of the movie. So depending on the age, it might be a little dark, but after that, it's still pretty good. We watch it every year in our household just because the kids love it, and I still enjoy it. It's not something I want to put on personally for myself. I prefer to watch it in a family setting.
I think what's cool about like flashback movies or these old nostalgia movies is the ones that really seem like they really hold up or are like Christmas theme, Halloween theme, stuff that happens to do with the holidays. Like I watched Jim Carrey's The Grinch when I was a little kid, watching that with my dad, seeing how much he enjoyed that. And then every Christmas it's coming on, or maybe let's say A Christmas Story. Every Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, the TV does not go off of A Christmas Story. And every time I watch it, it's not that the movie is good, but the memories I had within the movie. If that makes any sense. I mean, my Christmas Eve tradition with my dad is steak and shrimp by the TV watching A Christmas Story, and me and him both looking at each other and going fragile. Like that whole thing. Like whenever that movie comes on, I immediately text him now. I'm like, are you watching? He's like, got the shrimp already, man. I'm like, dude, it's amazing because I just find even more love with that movie where I'm going to keep watching it. And eventually when I have my own kids, I can do the same thing. And then with the Grinch's Christmas Story, like I watch that now. I'm older and I'll watch it by myself because I'm like, this is a fucking great movie. Like I just remember I'm flooded with so many memories with my family where I feel like holiday movies, all these types of nostalgic movies, they really give up more impact later in life, especially when you don't have those memories really like on hand to be able to just to go off into.
Yeah, and that's what we try to do with some of these other movies too, you know. So you mentioned like the holidays. There's plenty of movies that aren't very synonymous with holidays. And so one of the reviews that surprised me like early on with my son, he didn't care for Three Amigos. And to me that's one of the the most quotable movies in history, and I remember loving it. Now, I still enjoyed the movie, but for the purpose of our review, my son and I, when we watched it, it wasn't as funny as I remembered, to be honest with you. But I still enjoyed the watch, and I still enjoyed the lines delivered, and I still enjoyed the performances. My Little Buttercup, that that song and dance sequence is still very funny. But some of the other moments where there's a joke, I'm like, man, that didn't really hit me as I remembered, So so it's always interesting to kind of revisit some of these movies that you haven't seen in such a long time. I've had people be like, if I tease a movie that I'm going to be reviewing, I've had people be like, oh, that's one of my favorites as a child, and then I'll watch and be like, ooh, man, have you watched this recently? Because it was not good. So maybe if you haven't seen the movie in a while and I say something in a review, sometimes it actually makes people want to go check it out to see if it's changed. And some people, based on my review, they're like, you know what? I don't want to watch it because I don't want that to taint my memory of that movie.
Yeah, sometimes we remember stuff that's better than it actually was. Like I watched Beetlejuice, and I think Beetlejuice kind of holds up, but I don't think it was as impactful as it was when I was a kid watching it. It was a little bit more scary. Watching something, Indiana Jones holds up. I like that. I think anything that's like a good old classic, they hold up, especially like the newer Indiana Jones too. I know I saw the last one first, and then I had to go back and rewatch. And I actually had more respect for it because you get to see different changes and shifts to it.
That's right. Yeah, all movies I've reviewed too. Beetlejuice and Indiana. Beetlejuice and Indiana Jones. See, even though my son, as he got older, there's still some movies that he'll come back and do just because he's familiar that a certain title is a classic. Starting him into movies at a very young age had him appreciating older movies too. So I'm glad I did the podcast with him. But he came on and he enjoyed the Indiana Jones movies as well. I kind of forget his thoughts on all three of them, but I think him and I both agreed that the third one was probably the most fun that we had in terms in comparing to the other three movies.
Star Wars holds up. I know that for a fact.
Yeah, we've never done Star Wars, but we've watched them together. That's a fandom that I don't really want to touch.
It's a sketchy one a little bit. There's people that get pretty aggressive.
I haven't done the originals, so let me say that because I've never
seen the new ones.
Stuff.
I've never
Okay.
seen the new ones. I've only seen the old ones. And I've been in podcasts with people that do Star Wars podcasts. And I tell them the newer ones are just not fit for me. I prefer the older ones with Liam Neeson, the prequels, what they would call it. And that fandom gets a little bit crazy when it comes to that whole concept of making sure you get, no, it's this, bro. No, it's this, which is understandable because it was something very, very impactful at a time that there was nothing but Star Trek. And then eventually Star Wars came out and people are like, this changes the game. It's like when Coke gave you Coke Zero, you can get the same taste of Coke, but no calories. People are like, holy shit, this changes the game.
Yeah, it's funny that you said the old Star Wars, but then you said Liam Neeson, because when I hear old Star Wars, I think of the original three, from the late '70s and early '80s. So that's kind of where my mind went. But I host another show, and we're not really on a hiatus. It's just that this particular podcast, it's not one of my priorities, and it's also not one of my co-hosts' priorities because he too hosts like a bunch of different movie podcasts, but it's called Original Remake. And basically we take a movie that that has a remake, and then we kind of compare the two. So like with Star Wars, the OG, the original that came out in 1977, that was kind of based on a Kurosawa movie called Hidden Fortress. I think it was Kurosawa, but yeah, Hidden Fortress. And so we reviewed Hidden Fortress and Star Wars together. We've done, let me see, what else have you, I think you mentioned something else, but anyway, we have reviewed, well, it's a lost episode because we recorded, but one of our tracks was messed up and we couldn't put it out because it sounds so bad, but we reviewed the Karate Kid movie, the 1984 and the 2010 or 10, yeah, I think it's 2010. So things like that. When it came out, we did, the 1990 part 1, and then we reviewed the 2017 version of it. So if that sounds like something you guys be interested in, we've done that too. Point Break, we did the original and the remake. So we try to have fun with our selections.
Well, man, I give you credit to you, dude. You're doing a lot of stuff, and I appreciate you, hey, taking the time to do the podcast, first of all, because I know I just messaged you out of the blue, but I appreciate you taking the time, man, and just having a good old conversation, dude. I'd like to give you here a minute at the end to be able to promote your content so people can find your work.
Oh yeah, Robbie, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I have the day off, and that's kind of the hope too, right? When I reach out to people, for interviews and things like that, my hope is to get them sooner than later. So I was happy that you reached out, and I'm happy that we were able to make this work.
For sure. Well, what's your links, man? I want to make sure people can get it to you.
Okay, all right. Let's see. We talked about. Unfortunately, I don't have a postal service podcast. The funny thing is, I almost made one.
That's what we need to do.
I had one in the works, but work got so overwhelming that I couldn't do it. Basically, the idea was I was going to interview a mail carrier and just hear their stories. Stories from the streets, basically. Because there was. Did you ever hear about that Running Man challenge that came out like 3-4 years ago?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
so I did that with a coworker in our uniform in the parking lot. Okay, and that went viral. We had 80,000 likes and 1,000 shares or something. And people were finding my personal Instagram account, and I was getting friends that were mail carriers from all over the country. And that's kind of how I had the idea. It's funny that I'm promoting this because it doesn't even exist. But the idea was, I had all these new friends from around the country. I was going to invite them on the podcast and talk to them. But anyway, so that's not a thing, but I don't know why I brought that up anyway. We talked about Cobra Kai, Karate Kid. If that's something you guys are interested in that property, the interviews that we've done over 34 interviews, and we have many lined up still because they are filming season 3. The podcast is called Cobra Kai Kompanion. Kompanion is spelled with a K, just to be a little bit different, because if you type in Cobra Kai Kompanion with a C, you might get other results, but you
gotta be unique. You gotta,
exactly.
You gotta separate yourself from the other fake Cobra Kai companions.
You're right, because there's so many of them, right? So it's easier to find us that way. Podstalgic, very simple. Just type in Podstalgic. I'm the only one out there because I love to play on words and spelling things just a little bit differently. Again, that's your retro movie reviews, and we do some new releases too. So I wanted to throw that out because recently we just did Terminator Dark Fate because both my co-host and I we're fans of the Terminator franchise. Original remake. That's the title of that podcast. If you want to hear us compare and talk about like an original movie and its remake, one of my favorite ones that we did was A Star Is Born, right? So we did the 2018, and then we did the Chris Christopherson version on that show. And that's pretty much the gist of it. If you find those podcasts, you can find my social media accounts and probably links to anything else I do as well. There's just way too many other things that I do that I don't want to take up too much time to promote.
And send him all your mailing questions. Make sure you mail it, though. It only makes more of an impact if you send him a question about the mail through the mail.
I'd be happy to answer any of those questions because I feel it's not that it's my duty or my job to do so, but I want people to be more informed about how things are done so that way they're not always shitting on us and pointing the finger at us and blaming us for things. There are reasons for things.
All we got to say is fragile.